Welcome to the Dennis Report. I'm Dennis Atchison. New Brunswick is a small province with the ability to take that size and use it to advantage. Today's guest is going to speak with much passion, expertise, and knowledge on how our right to information and our privacy is key in one of the core narratives on how we come together as a people. So while the topic might look like it's about access to information or your privacy, what we're really speaking to is how do we live together and how do we create common solutions to complex problems. Hope you enjoy the interview. Our guest today is New Brunswick's very first Privacy and Access to Information Commissioner. And Bertrand has been doing this since 2010. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
6 years of this and you're still holding up okay?
I'm still the same height, which is great, and really enjoying the challenge. It's been a wonderful ride so far, yeah.
Great to hear. Interesting to think you're the first. Often in a lifetime, and especially with larger populations now, it's unusual to get to be the first.
It is, and there were so many firsts, even by just my appointment. First woman, obviously, which is a natural choice, but a francophone, and I'm a New Brunswicker, born and raised. And a first for the province in setting out the tone of where we should be going with access to information. How should we protect privacy? So a wonderful opportunity, huge challenge, as I've indicated, and I was thrilled to be the one they selected. Yeah. So,
was the birth of your office born of crisis? Meaning we need one of these because it's getting too crazy and we need to find a way to mitigate or communicate better these things? Or was it and recognize it in advance that, this is coming, so why don't we plan for it instead of react to it?
That's a really good question. In fact, New Brunswick was at the forefront of access to information in the 70s. Okay. This is a worldwide phenomenon now. Like, people talk about it today as if it's like an Electrolux in your home, but in the 70s, New Brunswick really took this to heart and decided to implement rules that would really promote this thing called right to know. People, the population, taxpayers, having access to information about how government works. Now, over time, we lost some terrain as other jurisdictions then took on this idea and they took off with the rules. Important reforms were actually happening elsewhere. So the creation of an office, which is mine today, solely dedicated to access to information and privacy, was to reinstill this great notion that New Brunswick could be a model, could lead the way, and brought about some very important reforms. People will remember also that this work was conducted under the mandate of the Ombudsman's Office. But the Ombudsman's Office has many facets, many portfolios, so it was one aspect. I'm actually thinking everything flows from right to information and protection of privacy. If a democracy doesn't have a solid foundation for that, you can probably say goodbye to a lot of other regulatory formats. So yes, it was not out of crisis, but out of need for certain. And I know the need was there because when the office was set up, I came into the position as a lawyer, having been in practice for about 25 years. I didn't have a phone, I didn't have a desk, a computer, a pen, and I said, boys, we need to get going. So as soon as we plugged in the phones that week, there were messages on. So we knew the public was interested and ready for us to spring into action, and we did.
Your office, as you mentioned, and map out its origins and resources and building it from scratch. So that's exciting because you get to create the tone.
Yes.
That's what you spoke to, which is lovely because it's a big piece of New Brunswick's narrative. trust in government and trust in public officials to find accurate information or to protect information. Where was I going to go with that? Because it had to do with those first phone calls. Because in general, the public has a sense of your work from media. And it might not always be, we went through
It's not the full picture.
Yes,
It's not
exactly.
the full picture.
So it tends to be quite linear. Oh, right to information, or
Yes.
a media will report, oh, we filed a right to information thing. It's taken 6 months before we've gotten the answer. A lot of it's blacked out. That dynamic.
Yeah.
And you sit right at that intersection, how that gets created, and there must be the public needs to deepen its understanding of the work that you do, similar to how they needed to deepen their understanding of the Ombudsman's office. Do you want to walk us through that a little bit?
I would love
the
to.
deeper
This
end?
is awesome. Every opportunity I have to advance who we are and what we do, I take it. And that's why I think we've done in excess of 100 public education outreach so far. I mean, I speak a lot. Well, my parents would have said that's not a surprise.
Yeah, I didn't
coming,
know if it was comfortable
coming
to go
from a
there.
large family, and I was in the middle. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, people don't really know what actually means a right to know or an access to information, codified right under the law. And what is the Commissioner's Office role in that? In fact, we're not involved at the access to information stages. So if you're interested in a particular topic about repairs to a road, you would want to access, to file a request with the Department of Transportation and find out. Now, depending on the answer you get, because I consider a request a question, I want to know about X. So if the department answers your question in a way that doesn't make sense to you, or it's not really complete or meaningful, you're going to come over to the Commissioner's office and say, Madame Bertrand, could you and your team look into that? I'm not really satisfied with the answer I got. Mm-hmm. That's where the approach that we've undertaken has been, in my view, hugely successful. As a lawyer in private practice, one of the big tenets of my approach was to resolve. It's not that I lacked work. I was very fortunate to have lots of work, but I like to resolve work. I worked as an arbitrator. I could negotiate. I could mediate, etc. Just really like to find solutions. So when I set up the office, I said, we're going to be, contrary to what happens elsewhere, an office that resolves complaints. And they said, well, that's what the law says you have to do. And I said, yes, but it allows me that tiny little carve out to resolve informally. So we developed an approach that resolving informally meant educating. Yes. Educate the government, public organizations at all levels, as to what the rules are. So if your request wasn't responded to in an appropriate manner, we could say, you did this really well, but not so much over here. And that wonderful gentleman, he's entitled to more information. So we're going to influence, convince you, the public body, to give out that information in an informal manner. And by doing that, the public body could save face, if I can use that expression. No, I wasn't there to humiliate or embarrass, but I said, you get a second kick at the can. Would you like to do that? And they said, well, what are my options? Well, you can resolve it that way, which is I explain what the information you're entitled to receive under the law, not what everything you wanted to, if it wasn't so, but what you were entitled to receive. And then the public body could make a choice to do that informally, or I would publish a report that said the same thing. Now, the publication of a report came with a recommendation from the commissioner, which that brings about that whole other conduct. They have to make a decision whether to follow the commissioner's recommendations or not. And that's all into the public domain. We resolve 4 out of every 5 complaints in my office that way. So we've had to expend a ton of energy to tell them, look, trust us, we're going to develop an expertise, we're going to learn the rules together, and we're going to allow you to apply these rules in such a way as that there won't be any complaints to the commissioner's office after a while. Everyone's going to know what to do.
Yeah, to follow that theme a bit, but I want to go back to another point. If you're doing your job perfectly, and if people are responding perfectly,
Yes.
in a way you need to work yourself out of a job.
I want to.
Yeah, because those conflict points and the trust and the confidences and the processes are now in place.
Correct.
To have that better relationship.
People find that, people laughed when I said that within a month of being a commissioner. I said, no, I think we really should work towards working ourselves out of a job, because oversight is another term that people don't understand. Oversight simply means that government has put in laws that they're supposed to do A, B, C. When they don't, they appoint people like me that come in and say, government, you need to do A, B, C. But it should be a staccato approach. We shouldn't be making jobs for ourselves that are permanent. We should come in as a staccato. We come in, implement, educate, enforce, get out. Because then they're okay, they're equipped. And this is how stabilization of rules should take place. Okay. So I don't believe in permanent oversight.
Interesting stuff. You said it, an interesting intersection of conflict points. The flip side of that coin, where that's a cooperative model, people are almost at peace in a way, that this is how the process works. They recognize they have to let go a little bit. You won't lose control, but your transparency will help the entire conversation. The general public needs to stop thinking that there's a secret agenda at play.
All the time.
Always come. But at the same time, though, there's an integrity to both sides, but it's diverging instead of converging, because there's a reason why government was acting a certain way within its paradigm. And then the public, with its social media, has really changed that dynamic as well. And New Brunswick has several key issues that will plunk you in the middle. I will say the word incorrectly, because I've been taught how to say it. But recently you had a hot button issue, and you don't need to get into details, but the process, where the glyphosate, is that how it's pronounced? So there's a social group organized to push against, thinking there's a hidden agenda going on. And there was a medical officer in the middle of the whole exercise, and then the government had its behavior. Not the details, but the process for you, like how hot does that get?
That's where, again, I think now, having been in this business for in excess of 30 years, I keep my eye on the politics. I keep my eye on what's going on social media, in the news, in the community. I really like to have a pulse as to what's happening, so that I'm not pulled in. It's very easy to be pulled in to a special interest groups avenue, to defend public decisions by governments, to feel that you're really overprotective of a particular decision or event. And I work very hard at not doing that. And why? Because we're independent. Yeah. We have to, we have to remain independent, because that's what we are. I was appointed to be an impartial oversight. I am not government. Yeah. Now, I don't represent the public either.
We'll get you a t-shirt that says, I'm not government, I'm not public.
And it's awesome. I'm not there to be a lawyer for those who complain. Yes. And I'm not there to be in defense of government's decisions. It's such an enviable position to be in, because we represent the law. Yeah. We're in the center. But representing the law and making sense as to how we deal with the situation is big in my books. Relevant, fair, clear, so that when we walk away from my involvement and my staff's involvement, people say, you know what? I understood what the case was about. I may not completely agree with its outcome, but I understood why Madame Bertrand said what she said, why she decided that way. And it's a natural high for me. It's wonderful. But it really takes a lot of effort, discipline, rigor to stay on course, because the influences are there all the time. And people try to influence us. They try to influence me personally. They try. They haven't succeeded yet, which is why I believe my office is enjoying a very good reputation so far.
The integrity element.
Yes.
As you speak, thought comes to mind as a theme, an underlying theme, which would be an important one for New Brunswick's narrative as a whole, because we need to get there. If we as a little province of 750,000 some odd people are to deal with the challenges coming in the next 20 years,
Yes.
we need to get our act together. And parts of those acts or themes are public trust and processes that help nurture that public trust. So as you spoke, I thought, okay, your reference point is the law, the interpretation of law, and an effective communication of that decision based on law.
Yes.
Does that also speak to common truth? Is there a convergence between law and truth, social truth, public truth? Or are we still stuck in the point, and this is kind of almost aimed as much at the audience as it is to you.
Yes.
But I want that connection.
Yes.
Because people will believe what they want to believe anyway.
Yes.
There's
many truths.
There's a problem there with that. So process allows us to get to where the shared truth occurs. So, and then people can let go. They're like, oh, this is how it works, and I get it now. And it's okay, I can live with this decision, even though it's not quite what I wanted. And I'm thinking glyphosate, or I'm thinking fracking, or I'm thinking of even the Gagetown Ferry. You know, it won't matter. But any point of conflict that the media will be chewing on for us, not helping that narrative. And then you sit in a role that can help us get to a shared truth.
Fact-finding is a huge component of the work we do. And I'm a stickler to get at the real facts, not assumptions, not half-truths, sources of information that may be incorrect or flawed. So we spend a lot of time to get at the actual facts, not those that maybe the members of the public think exist or that the government would like to present. We go and find the actual facts, because the concept of truth is difficult. Why? Because what is truth for you may not be the same truth as another person. So I try to go into, what we try to present are the facts that have an air of reality.
Okay.
An air of reality to what actually took place. And that's why often people are surprised as to what we present. They had no idea.
Yes.
They were making major opinion decisions based on headlines, half of a news item, Twitter sentences, Facebook synopsis of what's happening in reality. But I cannot rely on that. I have to fact find what actually took place. And I think if we did not have that commitment, our findings would be flawed. So it's not so much in search of the truth, because there's so many of truths out there. It's more of what really, having assessed all of it, took place, so that I can make a finding based on what took place.
Excellent. And thank you for wandering into that.
Yeah.
Because it's an important theme, and it's a little bit harder to get at than there's the goal, here's how we get to the goal, because it's so process oriented.
Yes, and I think if we could do away with assuming, people assume all the time about the contents of butter or margarine, to assuming how a government has made a decision because government wasn't very clear on how it made that decision. It didn't explain a particular project or plan to move ahead. So when we're not transparent, or when we don't fact find what actually happened, assumptions are made and they're never good. Have you noticed that?
No, yes,
assumptions
constantly.
are always very negative.
There's an underpinning theme to that for me, is that the general public, while they are awakening and getting more engaged, and they have the medium to do it through social media, there is a next step I see for them, their own integrity, to an openness to listening to the answer rather than
Yes.
try to predetermine the answer, and to accept that things have changed. Since 2010, 2012, large social systems have changed. We feel the ripple of that in our daily lives. And a simple, for instance, in the Brunswick case would be municipal reform. And the massive challenge that is, like, how can a province of 750,000 continue to sustain 350 plus municipal administrative structures? It doesn't make sense. But, and it's not to pick on them, it's just a recent example. Sussex and Sussex Corner have a vote a month and a half ago to time to show that, and they couldn't find a way to cooperate and to share some administrative resources. In the same...
But change is so frightening. Change is difficult.
Is it difficult because we approach it that way?
Well, throughout history, change meant wars.
Oh, okay.
It meant disputes. It meant being taken away from where you grew up to relocate based on ethnic definitions and lines. So our DNA, which is resistant to change, kind of propels us instinctively to worry about change. Now, try to instill change in a society en masse is not an easy task. And the proof of what I'm saying is, if I can take the world's changing down to my tiny little work as commissioner, I've been affecting change and trying to effect change on a daily basis for 6 years.
Yep.
And we are getting there. I believe if people approach change in baby steps, in small measures, as opposed to, oh my God, calamity, change today.
Yep.
Everyone runs for the hills.
Yep.
As opposed to, all right, there's a crisis looming. Let's educate everyone about that crisis. We need to go over here now. Let's do this in the next year. Then go on to the next step in year 2 and year 3. That's how you change how people think, number one. And the adaptation to the change is by osmosis. It's, slowly. Really, the proof of the pudding is convincing, educating, being transparent in what you're doing, and people will come along and will say, you know what, this is it's not as scary as I thought, and I think I can participate in that change. But change is a difficult concept. It's difficult.
Can I play with that a little bit?
Absolutely.
It's not really a contrary, it's actually a complementary point of view, because I come from a slightly different place.
Okay.
Where change is fun. And
Yes.
change is playful. So there's a great YouTube clip called The Change Theory. It's been around 8 years now. It's got 20 million hits. And I think it's at a public access, public transport staircase going down to a subway system in Sweden. And overnight, they turned the staircase part, an escalator one side, staircase on the other, turned it into piano keys, and they made noise. The goal was for the community was to have more people use the stairs than use the escalator. And they didn't block off the escalator, they just turned the stairs into piano keys, black and white piano keys. And they had cameras hidden and stuff. And through a 2-minute clip, you'll see humans coming out of the subway, that ding, 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 and they're playing songs, they're giggling and laughing. And the stat they run at the end of the clip was 66% more people used the stairs than used the escalator. So they got the change they were looking for. And then, of course, the hook at the very end, change is possible when it's fun.
May I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
They weren't forced to take the stairs, right?
No, it was fun.
That's the point that I was making.
Yeah.
Is that I don't think change doesn't have to be fun. I mean, we put fun into complaint investigations. It can be
That
great.
almost sounds like a contradiction.
I know, but you can. But to me, the point that I was making is that instead of forcing people to take the stairs and taking away the escalator, they allow these baby step adaptation to this change. And the community itself proceeded to change. That's why they were educated that stairs can be actually good for you, and you're going to create music in your mind or in your world, or you're just going to be changing how you're behaving. I do not dismiss what you're saying. I love change. That's why I'm pushing with rigor, with discipline, that we move towards an open and transparent way of governing, because it can be so positive. It has so many positive outcomes. The benefits are immeasurable.
Yes. And it's that excitement. So thanks for showing that excitement, because when I use the word fun, I have an adult or a mature sense of it, but it's tied deeply to the child who sits in a sandbox and plays with stuff and creates worlds.
Yes.
And we're in that phase now where we need to go back to creating new worlds, new systems, new balances, new directions. So the humans need to find that with themselves, but in their adult life now, that playfulness or the joy that comes from the excitement of creating new, which means you got to let go of some of the old stuff. So the industrial economic model might not apply to New Brunswick anymore. So what does the new one look like? IT can handle some of that, and there's a circumstance where change is integral to that whole industry. But you sit at a different intersection because it's purely based on relationship. You've got concrete outcomes, you've got investigations, but the core of the whole thing is how humans are interacting with each other.
Yes, but there's always a corollary effect to that. After we've done our work and we've left that situ, all of the good discussions, interactions, education that took place remains. Yes. And that gets adopted. And every time that happens, it grows exponentially. So I don't believe that our work is just an adjunct to complaint, one complaint case, get it done and leave. There's a lasting impression. Why? Because there was so much energy and commitment and influence brought into the process. But also hearing you talk brings me to mention this point. After a while, I think we also have to advise politely everyone that unless we decide to change, we're going to be left behind. And I, for one, do not want to be left behind. It's very embarrassing to have your intelligent phone manipulated by a child in a better way than I could. I will not be left behind. So therefore, I will go in my own little secret place and study the darn thing. I think that approach applies to so many of the changes that you speak of. Small province, 738,000, I believe we are at this time. I'm related to half that population because I'm French, and that happens, and I know the other half. Yeah. So, but that all to say is New Brunswick is a wonderful, small province that can affect change for itself because we're small. People seem to think we're small, we can't do. No.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite. You can do so much. My office is small. I have 5 wonderful professional ladies who work with me, and we have to oversee over 500 public bodies and 22,000 healthcare providers. That's what we do on a daily basis. And people say, well, how can you possibly do that? And I say, well, it's because we're committed. It's not the numbers of people, but it's the level of commitment to the job that makes a difference. So New Brunswick can do that. New Brunswick is small. If it's committed to change, to adapt, to not be left behind, we're gonna we can become a model for the rest of the world, I think.
Yep, yeah, we can fly.
We can fly.
And there's pressures coming from other places that will help. It's what you were speaking to earlier about crisis shifts, crisis creating shifts. So if we don't get our act together in the next 20 years, because of pressures on water, because of pressures on land, because of pressures from climate change, that people are coming here. They're all going. Atlantic Canada is this.
I'm
beautiful
surprised we
little
don't
pocket.
have an influx
Yes.
of people to New Brunswick, because our climate here is pretty darn good compared to what's happening elsewhere in the world. The water quality issues are very few and far in between. We enjoy a very good level of greenery, green technology as well, and approach. I mean, natural resources definitely are a big issue for us, but I'm just shocked that people are not flocking to New Brunswick.
And when you say that, it makes me grin, because in the tourism world, which could be growing a bit, but practical experience with the tourism world, if you're out and about and you meet people from other places that have come here,
Yes.
and you ask them, you're like, so how'd you land on the trail at
Yes.
Sunday National Park? Oh, we really love it here because no one knows it's here. And I've heard
Right.
that, I don't know how many
Nice.
times the past couple
Yeah.
of years. So, funny,
That's true.
a little catch-22. It doesn't mean a scale couldn't be worked out or a measure could be worked out for a target so that tourism industry grows by 15 to 20%. Then, because of balance with all the other pressures, that's where we stop.
I know.
One of the major themes that New Brunswick still hasn't caught on yet, but it's growing, no pun intended, is food and food security.
Yes.
We import 90%, 92% of our food. And interviewing past guests, and there's been several on the food theme as an economic driver, as a self-sufficiency driver, but we can't, those guests haven't been able to find the gears where it's going to mesh. It's closer. We didn't even talk about it at all 10 years ago. But now there's all kinds of social enterprise that are doing great things, but there's a disconnect with policy development and legislation that would then tip it the rest of the way.
But the 20 to 40-year-olds are taking over that very aspect. They have a wonderful approach to what I call a balanced lifestyle, that they will dedicate themselves to their careers, but they're not going to be dying at the desk, dying at their computer for work. They're going to enjoy a social conscious, looking after the downtrodden, buy locally, encourage healthy lifestyle choices, sports, good diet, no smoking, which all leads to a very low rate of crime. And the network that is created with that kind of thinking, because they're the ones on social media, they're the ones who are fueling the development, they will push this information along, because that's my key is, where's the information? What are people talking about? Where are they going? They're pushing a whole new way of life for New Brunswick. I mean, you just said it. We import 90%, did you say those stats? Most of the farms have closed down in the last 20 years in New Brunswick. Well, now we're talking about community farming, because who do you know can go and buy 200 acres of land and these huge tractors and develop a farm? But community farming is going to take over that. Now, that fuels government's decision on how to set its policy to encourage development of agriculture and local food harvesting, production, and tourism can also fuel the other side of it, because it's such a beautiful province. The rivers, the little mountains. I have to be careful not to say too many things about mountains, because a lady that works with me came from Switzerland, where they're real mountains. They're hills in New Brunswick, but there are hills. We love them. But we have the ocean, we have sandy beaches, rocky terrain. I'm really surprised. I'm surprised that people are not just moving here en masse, you know, every year. But anyway, I just love New Brunswick. I'm a big ambassador for for New Brunswick. I just love it.
Great. This is a perfect place for us to stop. We're going to take a 2-minute pause to run some community service announcements, and thank you very much. We'll be back shortly. We're back with Anne Bertrand, the Privacy and Right to Information Commissioner. She's sharing with us her professional knowledge as well as her personal wisdom on the province and where we need to go and how we can get there. Something like that, eh?
I'm really enjoying this conversation.
This is good. To go back a bit to the professional side and the work side.
Yes.
Media in general will know your work by how the media, or people in general will know it by how media report it.
Yes.
So it's a little after the fact. The work's been done and now there's a story that media want to report.
Sometimes it's before, but...
Okay, good point. But missing in the process is that there'll be some awareness of what you do, but there's an impact when you put out the request for information to a system, to a piece of the bureaucracy, healthcare bureaucracy or transportation bureaucracy, like you mentioned earlier. Do you have any sense, or can you share with us the impact on what it takes inside that system to come up with the information you just asked for? Does that make sense? Was that an okay question?
I believe where you're going with that is what I'm about to answer.
Okay.
When people exercise their right to know, that they ask or request information, it's not just because they want to make work for government.
Mm-hmm.
They're genuinely, in our experience has shown, they're genuinely interested in what's going on. And the subject matters are hugely varied. So when we bring a smile to that request, as opposed to, oh, I'm so busy, I'm a public servant, I have so many things to do, and I completely get that as commissioner, that this is a lot of work. I mean, this is attentive minutiae of detail work that is difficult. But if we can put a smile to the request that this is a good thing, we're letting the public know what you're doing. All the good things that government does. Do we hear often about all the good things that government does? Not so much.
No.
And that's what that is one of the reasons why the whole notion of requesting and obtaining information fuels what I call the conversation. The conversation with taxpayers, with community interest groups, with individuals, with your neighbors, with town hall meetings. Why? Because people all of a sudden are equipped with facts. They're equipped with pieces of information that they can participate in the debate. When they don't have that information, they cannot. So that creates a distance from our governing bodies and an angst, because a decision is felt, a decision is imposed upon us because we didn't know where it came from. So putting a smile to the act of requesting the information helps everybody. It helps government as much as it helps the individuals who exercise that right. It helps the healthcare system operate much more effectively because people want to know what is up with the wait times, what is up with issues at a particular hospital, or how many healthcare providers are there in my region versus another region? Is there a fair distribution of infrastructure, services, etc.? All of that is good. People shouldn't shy away from the discussion. They should not shy away, because with discussions, as you indicated, comes about solutions, comes about new ideas. Wow, new ideas. Those are the baby steps I'm talking about.
Do you think the public need to have a better understanding of the impact of their questions? So you mitigate the process, you facilitate the process, and push it towards solutions. But I'm curious, I have a hunch that the public might not understand that when they do get to the point in the process where they can actually file for right to information and then you pass it to the system, that the amount of work that creates within the system. I think there would be some lovely grace that would be created if general public understood that your request, while totally valid and very important to the part of the narrative, it might take 6 months before you get that answer, because that system might be tapped out just delivering its daily service, never mind having to take a pause, find the 2,000 emails that relate to that topic, collate the emails so you can follow along the storyline.
One word for that, reasonableness. Okay. Everyone's got to be reasonable. Come on. I mean, we're small.
Yes.
750,000 people in a province that is run by, what's the size of the civil service? 25,000?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the resources are depleted. In fairness to government, for a moment, in fairness to government.
And government different from politics, correct?
Yes.
Good.
In fairness to government, the governing bodies, municipal, provincial, federal, in fairness to government, they process and they receive and process a ton of requests. It can be just a simple question that you put to your town councillor or the staff at the city hall, to a formal request of this magnitude to a big line crown corporation or inline department. We meaning the commissioner's office, only sees 9 to 10% of that in complaints. Okay. That means the majority of those things are happening every day in a very satisfactory manner out there in the community. The ones that come to me, though, will generate some media attention. Some of them are sensitive, some of them are delicate. They're high profile. But it shouldn't, I don't want the message to come away that, because we're busy and we see a lot of files, that's what's happening every day. Also, the reasonableness of the request will mean if you're going to get an answer in a timely fashion or not. Yeah. Is it necessary to ask for 5 years worth of data if 1 year's worth of data will sufficiently inform you of that subject matter?
It's a good example.
It is a good example. And I love the exercise of the right to know. So I don't want to really tramp on that or trump it. But I also completely get that our public service resources are depleted and they function at a difficult level today. So I try to bring balance to that equation. When I'm asked, I will try to bring balance to that. But everyone's got to be reasonable.
Thank you. That's great. Bringing some themes together from past interviews. We had a young gentleman on talking about the millennials living a different way and having a different perspective on things. So
I have 2 at home. Well, they're no longer at home, but I have 2 of those. So
they'll be back.
They'll be back.
Sorry.
That's funny.
Yeah. So Nick Scott was on. He runs a project called Data for Impact. So he spoke with much passion to take large amounts of data and process it a certain way so you can find the answer you're looking for in a very quick time, and very immediate. And I thought, we need to get Nick to talk to Anne, because somewhere in that process, there's new technology and younger thinking or more flexible thinking that'll go into that system and allow maybe easier access to the information that was desired in the first place, rather than the crunch version that we currently do.
It's the regurgitation of big data. Open data is a concept that is now being promoted worldwide, and is to allow those who are technologically savvy, who develop these wonderful applications, to somehow put data into the mix, and they come out with all these solutions. They're everyday solutions. The one that is often used as an example is the app that allows you to know if the public transit system is late, or is it full, and especially in big cities. Imagine how wonderful that application is for everyday users. And that's made possible by the data being provided from government, or the organizations who collect that data. So now, I have a privacy commissioner hat as well, so we have to be careful when we talk about open data.
Yeah, because there's, this would be a good point to bring it up, there's a lovely irony in your title.
Yes.
access to information.
It's
and
not
privacy
lost on
commission.
me.
I thought I almost wanted to start the show with that. I was like, how do you live in this schizophrenic world between these two
The
pressures coming
bipolar.
at you? Yeah. So we'll check on you in 10 years.
Well,
I
I actually enjoy that split personality.
Yeah, but that ties specifically to the example we were speaking to. So if we have more open data,
Yes.
and if it's a healthcare issue,
Yes.
then we can all think of stories we've read in the media where someone left some CDs in a public place and someone swiped them, or a laptop went missing and data got access. And you want to speak to the tension between those two roles so that the public in general will have a better sense of the balance in a more serious way than the bipolar way.
Data is not all created equally. And to put it simply, for your listeners, for your viewers, there's identifiable data and non-identifiable data. There's a lot of discussion on, is it truly ever non-identifiable? Again, coming back to being such a small place. So I get that if a couple of identifiers put to this person can allow the identification to be restored. So yes, but when we're talking about open data, we're talking about scrub data, data that really does not purport to only speak of you in the way you associate yourself in your community or the way you conduct your activities in the community outside of a gregarious community, outside of a group. Because when we pull away from the scrub data, what we see is the public in its conduct, as opposed to having identifiers about you that attack your privacy or things that are of a most private importance to you. Open data, common sense. Look at the data. Is it scrubbed to the level that it would allow it to be given full access? We were asked that many times, and I'm a big proponent of open data, and as long as it's done the right way. But we can't say because of privacy, which, by the way, a lot of people don't know what that really means. Because of privacy, we shouldn't steer away from the good that comes from research, development of applications, software, to help our society go towards, remember that place we were putting it? We want to avoid the calamity or crisis that's happening in 20 years, so having access to open data, encouraging the development of methods, methodologies, services that will help us go that way, it'll be great. Now, privacy, which allows me to be, like you say, that split personality, actually keeps the access right honest.
Yes.
So privacy is always here for me.
Yep.
So it allows me to look at, is the exercise of the right to information proper? Are we going too far? I look at the concept of privacy, which is protection of personal information. Now, when I'm dealing with a privacy breach, I have to look at, okay, from the concept of right to information, did we go too far in protecting or overly protecting or not enough protection that caused the breach? So contrary to many schools of thought that think this is completely crazy notion to have both in one title, to have both in one statute, I think it really works well because I have to think of both all the time, which it should be.
Yep. The two energies give you a
The
balance.
two energies absolutely equilibrate, égalise, on avance in the center, and neither the one should trump the other. And the rules of the statute, which we love, the right to information and protection of privacy, is a statute that is well written. It is, I mean, it's it's not for the weak-minded because it's law, you know, it's text, it's legislation. But the way we are using it today, it works really well. Like we've become we've become avid fans of it because of those rules that interplay. Awesome. I really appreciate your question because I don't have a chance often to talk about the duality of my role and that I take both of them very seriously.
And earlier you intimated, and maybe you already answered it, but people don't understand privacy.
Yes.
Is there a slightly different version from how we understand it in common terms and how you understand it professionally?
There is. And that's because what privacy means to you may not mean the same for me, because we're individuals. Some people are more private than others. And then I'm asked often, well, Madame Bertrand, have you not seen what's happening on Facebook? Do you not recognize all of that? And I said, it's because of social media that privacy has become this huge industry, this huge concern. Because when we choose to share personal information, what we do, our photographs, our events, what I had for breakfast, when we do that, it's because we consent to be providing and sharing that information. But it doesn't mean that you can take my information and do what you want with it. So that's the concept of privacy. It means different things to different people, but the general view is that the information that is mine belongs to me. So I'm in the driver's seat as to how it will be used, who's going to collect it, who's going to share my information and when, etc. And that I have the right to know that. I have the right to know. Now, in many instances, we don't have a choice but to share our personal information. For instance, to get a driver's license. We have to. Why? We wish to have a driver's permit. But having the concept of privacy codified into law obligates those who take our information to protect it at all times. So they can only use it to enable me to get my driver's permit. They shouldn't be able to share it unless they told me and I consented. So it's that kind of thing. I think privacy is a really sexy topic. It's interesting. I cannot make up the cases that come through our office about privacy. They're always interesting. They're fascinating. But it allows us to also educate the public on what privacy means and educate those who take our information on their obligations to protect our information.
Great point. Quick little adjunct to it, and then we've got about a minute left. So we talk about privacy in the context often of social media today.
Yes.
But there was a time when everybody knew each other's stuff in town or in the province, so the privacy thing isn't a new topic. It might have a new application, but not a new topic. About a minute left. How would you like to close out?
I really would like people to recognize that they're very fortunate in New Brunswick to have an office like ours. And it's not because I'm sitting here talking to you and I'm so self-important, but the fact that our province was able to deploy resources to allow us to assist in this great movement called Right to Know and protection of privacy is big. Some countries would die to have that. And that we were able to mount an office that will encourage the proper application of the rules as opposed to just being regulatory for regulatory's sake is a real godsend. I mean, the benefits that flow from that, I don't think we'll be able to measure in the short term. I strongly believe after my term is done and the next commissioner comes in, we're going to be able to measure the effect of having this office for New Brunswick in 10, 15 years from now. And I hope by then they'll say it was a good thing. We did a good thing there. That's what I'd like to close on, that people think that their tax dollars are being spent wisely, and we get it, and we're very conscious of that, of providing a good service.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
No, absolutely wonderful. It's great.
Yeah. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you for the time. And thank you for watching. As always, you can find this program on the DennisAtchison.com website after it's up on CHCO television. As always, be good, have fun, and love each other.